So
So thanks everybody for coming. So thank you guys for coming to today's Velociti meeting. It's Sunday, 2 to 3 p.m. Might be a hard time to come, but thank you guys so much for coming right before the school year starts. So today we have Dr. Erin Chambers. So thank you so much for coming to our meeting today. And before we get started, we're just gonna go through a quick table of contents of what we're gonna do today. So first we're gonna go, who are we? Like describing our initiative and why we started it. Who is Dr. Erin Chambers? About our speaker, and we're gonna ask her like 5 really general interview questions about her experience in STEM. Then we're gonna do a Q&A session where you guys get to answer or get to ask questions to her and she will answer them. And then finally, we get this really fun activity that's led by Dr. Chambers that you guys will really love. So, Sydney, do you want to introduce these 3 statistics?
yeah, so a lot of the reason why we started Velociti is because there's a huge gap, gender gap in STEM right now. So only about a quarter of workers in the STEM field are women, and more specifically in computer science, only 20% of computer programmers are women, which is lower actually than the average, which is sad. And women in STEM generally earn 35% more than women with non-STEM jobs. So it's really a really good opportunity for a lot of women to get into, and that's why we want to spread the joys of STEM.
And a little bit about our program. We are a Women in STEM empowerment program that gives young girls like you guys a chance to learn about STEM careers and immerse yourselves in the world early on. And we have panels with renowned women in STEM that will give you hands-on activities that will help you kind of experience what you might want to get into when you grow up, because there's thousands of different areas that you can get into in your life, but these STEM ones are the ones that are so hard to find resources to learn about in our community. So we strive to inspire the next generation of female innovators. And a little bit about us. I'm a junior in high school, or I'm going to be a junior in the fall, and I'm part of the robotics team and math club, and I also like calligraphy and playing the flute.
Yeah, and I'm a senior at Clayton High School in St. Louis. I'm part of my Science Olympia team. I'm also pretty involved in the school newspaper, and I do martial arts outside of school. Yeah.
And the last thing, this is our last slide, I swear. So registering is completely free. Just visit our website and you can RSVP for future events. Our meetings are every other Sunday from 2 to 3 p.m. on Zoom. And then we also just came out with the STAR program that for every meeting you go to, or for every 2 people you get to sign up, you get a star. And for every 5 stars, you get a cool prize. Yes. So now for the interview part, the part that you've all been waiting for. Who are you and what do you do, Dr. Chambers?
Well, thanks for organizing this and for the lovely overview. So I'm a professor and associate chair of computer science at St. Louis University. I am an educator and a researcher. I have 3 kids, so I'm also a parent and juggling homeschooling my children on top of my students this semester, which is nice and lively. My cats and children may interrupt at any given moment, so I apologize if we're interrupted. What else am I? I'm active in my local church. I attend a Catholic church in St. Louis. I actually coach Lego robotics. My kids pulled me into this, and it's like Legos and robots. It's like my dream toy. So I've been probably enjoying this more than my children have. I'm probably that mom, but not with sports, with robotics. It happens. I love music. I actually really miss concerts right now. So I miss going to shows all over the place, outdoor and indoor, and I love theater and all the other hobbies people normally do. So what I do at work, and the thing I identify the most with, so I'm what's called somewhere between an applied mathematician and a theoretical computer science. So I work on the interface between mathematics and computer science, the things, the formal notions of what is computable and what computers are able to handle. So if you go one slide later, these are my pretty pictures of my research area. So if you look at the top right corner, the triangulated double torus is what that's called, and then the cycles on the torus, this is where my thesis work began. I was interested in surfaces, and in particular in sort of computation, like what can you compute? So these 3 cycles I use as an illustration of different types of cycles. Like the red one, if you cut it, the shape is still connected. It's called a non-separating cycle. The blue one is separating, right? If you cut it, you have two pieces. And the blue one is somehow more interesting because if you cut it, you still have things on either side, right? There's still one of these toruses on either side, whereas the green one is what we call trivial. If you cut it, it's two pieces, but it doesn't get anything interesting, right? There's no topology on the other side of it. There's no other handle or hole or anything. So this is meant to sort of illustrate some of my thesis work. I worked in graphs on surfaces. And from there, once I got a faculty position, I was really interested in learning how to take this work in graphs. And I continue to work in the mathematical side of it. I still work in graphs on surfaces. And if you look at the top left, that's a different kind of graph theory. So this is, instead of looking at a graph on the surface, the idea is to take like that pink blob, which is supposed to be sitting in 3 dimensions, and project it and get something that's lower dimensional. So you see on the other side of the line, a graph, something that's just curves meeting up. And then do data analysis on this graph, right? Try to say, what was the shape of the original pink thing? Can I learn anything about the pink thing by looking at the black thing? And then can I do things to the black thing? If you go to the one over where it looks like blue in the middle and then a different graph. So these are mathematical operations we can do on the graphs in order to learn more about the original shape. And the whole motivation for this is that computers can only go so far. And higher dimensional things, the higher the dimensional of the data, the harder the problems are. So this is where I started with. I really love this core notion of graphs and surfaces. And what I've started to do more recently, if you go to the lower part, is look at surfaces and really try to apply these in different domain areas. So the bottom left, it's a little fuzzy, but that's a picture of my collaborator at the Danforth Plant Sciences Institute. I think we're in the last year of our grant together. So this is now a 4 or 5 year collaboration, which took several years because I'll confess that the last biology class I took was my freshman year of high school, and I should have paid more attention. I know nothing about plants. I know a lot about computers and a lot about mathematical shape, but I know nothing about plants. So he knows a lot about plants, and in particular, his research area is root systems. He's very interested in what genetics control roots, because, for example, bushier roots are better for wet areas, and skinnier roots that go deep are better for drought areas. So he works on crop science for the most part. So what you see him holding, you can barely make it out, is a rice root system. He grows these in gel, and he also, in the summer, he goes out and he digs them up and he images them. The middle picture is a corn root, which he dug up with his lab and put in an X-ray CT scan. He's got this really cool, elaborate scanner that goes back and forth. I got to take a tour of his lab. It was amazing and messy and very biological. But what we're doing is turning those root scans, these big, messy, ugly things, into graphs. So you can see the blue skeleton, the blue and the red highlighted in the middle. And we're trying to say, okay, he wants to know what shape this root system is. Well, it turns out everybody knows what you mean by shape, but nobody knows how to measure shape. So we apply all these different metrics. So you can start to measure angles and whorls and total area and length versus surface area. Like there's 20 million different ways to measure shape, and some of them correlate heavy with genetics. So I don't know much about genetics or the statistical analysis of genes, but he does. So I take his data, and we've got this pipeline to measure it and examine it and give numbers to it. And then we feed that back into his genetic data. So that's one collaboration. Another way I've used this, if you look at the middle picture, this is a dancer figure, and actually using a common set of tools in the language MATLAB, we are able to turn this into a curve. You can see the blue thing in the middle. And in fact, this is not, you can see other parts of the curve, the graph that represents the 2D shape. What we did in this project was take all sorts of different dancer images, and we were able to align them, which doesn't sound all that fancy because humans are very good at this, right? Those are her arms. That's the same, right? Computers can't do this. There's a reason all those computer security questions say which things have the stoplight and which things have a crosswalk. So it turns out computers suck at doing that. So they can't align, they can't recognize that. Image data is just very hard for computers to deal with. So what we're trying to do is get rid of the image, go down to a graph, and use the graph to align the underlying structures. And a lot of what this is trying to automate things that people normally do. But now that we have so much image data, it's really, you've probably noticed if you have a a Google or an iPhone, it tries to tag people and objects, and it tries to let you search for cats and pop up all your cat pictures, things like that. This is sort of some of the mathematical basis of these algorithms. And then the bottom right, I won't go on forever about it, I promise, but I love my research, so it's easy for me to spend a lot of time on it. The bottom right is actually a mesh from the Smithsonian Institute. And the goal of this research project sort of involved a lot of papers, but this particular image, they take this data and they scan it and they get points, right? You've probably seen, if you've ever watched something on Pixar, or I remember Gollum and Lord of the Rings, right? They put him in this black spandex suit that had these little motion capture dots, and they had him move and they grabbed the points over time. But you probably never think about how they take those points and turn it into something that has texture and make it move, and not just these points and these points, but this shape which animates and gets to the next shape. So this whole line of research, which I do a little bit with, it's a very big line of research, is about how do we make the meshes? How do we take the points and get an accurate shape out of it? And then how do we do things like quantify and measure? So this one is this bottom right one is about finding the best way to move one curve to another curve while morphing on top of one of these surfaces. So again, this is these are all images taken from my papers or research over the years to kind of give you an idea of, when I say math meets computer science, this is what I mean, right? There's these beautiful mathematical concepts, but how do you make them efficient and explore what computers can manage with them?
Wow. So what led you to pursue STEM?
I don't want y'all to think less of me. Money, in fact. So my brother majored in computer science and is 8 years older than me, and I worshiped him as a child because he was my big brother. And he came home and he was like, oh yeah, computer science, you're good at math, you're good at computers, you'll make a lot of money, go do computer science. So at the time I was interested in either computer science or theater, because I was really active in my high school thespian club and did all state theater and all these activities. And I sat down and talked to my theater teacher, who said, you realize you'll be working nights and weekends for the rest of your life, and, you know, very uncertain and job to job, and you have to move around. And I sat down with my brother, who gave me the chart of annual salaries of computer science. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give that a try. And I'm glad I did. I fell in love with it, but I was good at math, I was good at computer science, and so I thought, why not? Let's see what happens.
Well, thank you for being honest. That I haven't heard that
Not
one
a very
before,
glamorous
but
one. It's
yeah,
a really good career path, it turns out. So I'm glad I did.
yeah, the statistics say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So, what makes you excited to go to work? / what's the most rewarding part of your job?
So there's 3 parts to my job. Any university professor has to do what they call service, teaching, and research. And your contract with the university involves some formal percentage of those 3 things. So people who don't teach usually have to do more research, and people who serve in a big leadership service role usually have less teaching, that kind of thing, and it's a balance. So I guess I'd have to pick one of the 3. My least favorite of the 3 is the service, the meetings and the department shuffling. But I love working with students, and in particular that moment where they fall in love, or they find what they want to do, or even just have that, I don't know if any of you have been in a class and just had a moment of, I get it, right? I see what they're trying to tell me, or I've realized this connection to something else, and it suddenly makes sense. So that's an incredibly rewarding moment as an instructor, and I love helping students get to that point. Sometimes it's even more rewarding when they've had to struggle to get there because they work for it. And then I think babbling on for 5 minutes about shapes and topology probably gave you an idea that I'm really passionate about applied mathematics and how it can be made practical. And people always say, well, math, you're never going to use it, it's not useful. And I think the technical revolution has shown how false that is. From everything from cat pictures to medical imaging to big data at Google, seeing how these very theoretical notions of mathematical constructs can become very, very useful, and in fact can change the world, is something I can't not be excited about.
And what is a big surprise about being a woman in STEM?
So I'll be honest and say I began with fairly negative experiences in my field. The numbers in the 90s when I went to undergrad were even worse for women in computer science, and the stereotypes were strong. I learned some unhealthy coping techniques as far as how I was expected to interact and how to be one of the guys and how to get through that landscape. And I think the biggest surprise as I've gotten longer and longer in the field is how easy it is to find support. I felt very alienated and alone at the beginning, and I wasn't, you hit that first coding class. I don't know if any of you have had a coding class in school. For me, it was that freshman programming class, and I hated it. I hated every minute of it. It was all guys. I got hit on constantly. The homework felt isolating and alone. It was really, really a sad semester for me. But when I got through it, I found out how much I liked some of the people, right? You get better at finding your people as you move through these landscapes. And I figured out how to use this work, right? It's not all pen and paper calculation and calculus or basic for loops and programming. I found out how vital this was and how many places I would see these concepts appear and how much I could do with them. So I think my biggest surprises were to find out I did fit in, that there was an exciting place and that I would be not just welcomed, but championed by some of my male colleagues and my female colleagues. And that there was just such an opportunity that I would have missed had I made an appointment to drop out that freshman year. And I'm really glad I didn't.
Wait, did you actually go to the appointment and decided not to, or was it like?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, wow.
Yeah, I was like, okay, well, we'll see what they're going on about and give it one more year. And that's good advice I've lived by is give it a year. Like, try it and you can always change it.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what's something that you wish you knew before going into a STEM career / any advice for going into one?
For me, and actually for all my friends and students, some of the best advice has been to kind of roll with it. It's very easy when I talk to my students for them to feel like they have a checklist. I've got to finish this and then get into that school and then get that internship and then that's my first job. And if I don't finish my checklist, I'm a failure, right? Somehow. And it's funny because at this point in my career, some of my closest friends failed along the way. We all do, right? We all pivot, as they like to call it these days, and take a different career path. And, oh, this job didn't hire me. Let's try this one. And I think especially in computer science, but in STEM as a whole, you will be surprised at how many pivots there are and how looking back, they feel like the biggest failure of your life. And in fact, those turned into the key opportunities, right? That job you settled for, that time you dropped out of that class, that time you switched majors, that time. One of my best friends left the PhD program. He, quote unquote, dropped out with a master's and has had one of the most rewarding careers of anyone I know since then. He took a chance, he leaped into industry and found his home. And so not holding on to the expectations of what your career should be, but just to be open to the potential and the possibilities, because it's such a fast-moving, fast-paced, and frankly, very secure career field. You will not have the career you think you will, but I have not seen one of my students yet not have a very satisfying career in the end. So.
And now for the Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions, you can say them out loud or you can text them into the chat or type them in for the next couple minutes. So we're just gonna be waiting for the questions to roll in.
This is always the moment for every instructor where we're like, oh, nobody's talking. What do I do?
Yeah. So I guess if I can start with a question real quick, because I have one right now. What is a project that you think you're going to be working on in the next couple years or couple months, maybe?
So, well, Oh God, so many. Well, right now, how to teach online seems to be a big one that I'm going to be working on. From the research side of things, the top left picture and then the plan, that set of things, those represent 2 grants that I've currently got active. So a lot of my research at this point is I sit and I think about problems. I identify, you know, some hole or something I'm interested in thinking about, and then either by myself or with a friend, with a colleague, they're friends by the end of this process inevitably, I write a grant. And then it's a very slow process, especially the more interdisciplinary you get. So that work with the biologist, I mean, he had to teach me basic terminology about plants. And that's got 4 of us on that grant, and the other 2 had just as much like ramp up time to try to understand what the question was before we could look at solving it. So it tends to be a very lengthy process. So that took us a year or 2, and then we send it to the grant agency, and then if we're lucky, it gets funded a year later, and then we have 3 to 4 years of funding. So I actually, at this point, ironically, occasionally I'll pick up a random problem, but I have to plan far in advance. And so the 2 that I'm most excited about, the plant one is just ending, and we're gonna probably go back and write a more mathematical one. I'm very interested in sort of pushing the limits of the theory side of that, of what can you compute if I give you this graph. And the top one is on something, that one's a stretch for me. So I've started collaborating with a woman who works in applied math at Michigan State University, and she's interested in, they call them metrics for graphs, metrics for a particular class called read graphs, these shaped graphs. And so we are now locked into a 3-year grant and already writing the next grant. So this is a very long-term collaboration.
Okay, cool. Oh, we do have a question from Maria. Which is better for practicing programming? Doing competitive programming problems from informatics competitions? Sorry, I don't know. Or working on projects? Well, that's a really good question.
That's a really good question, and I hope my answer is okay and that there is no answer to this. I would say any actual programming practice is fantastic, and it doesn't matter where you get it. So what I tell students is pick what you're excited about, right? So if you like competitive informatics, good Lord, do it. Find a group, dive down that rabbit hole, have fun, pair programming, it's great. But if you're more, I want to think about this project, I want to work on something independently, that's great. I mean, if I struggle actually with both of those, I do a lot of sort of collaborative work. So I don't like individual projects. I like some kind of structured work where I say, okay, I'm going to do this piece, you do this piece, let's come back tomorrow and work on it together. So I think any of these things are good, and there is such a hunger for computer science training in industry right now that anything you do, put it on your resume, you're gonna be great. Like, there's no wrong answer. It's just about what appeals to you, I think.
Even independent projects though, like if I like made like a GPA calculator or something, is that something that I could put, or like
Absolutely.
Really? Is that, oh wow, okay, cool.
Yeah, in fact, it's good to have a few of these small random projects, because eventually, professionally, you get something called the GitHub repo. I don't know if you guys have seen GitHub on the web. So it's a place where you check in your code and you can set it to be private or shared, or you can share it with just some friends. And a lot of businesses really like, in addition to a resume, they want a GitHub link because they want to see what you've coded. So even if it's just a script or a small program, like you can show, and eventually you'll probably delete that because in 6 years you'll have better projects, or you won't want them to look at that code, right? But this is something you can evolve. So throw it in a GitHub repo, list it on your college entrance essays, talk about it when you do summer internship. Like, this is a great thing to start doing.
Oh, awesome.
So
we do another question. No, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have another question from Jamie asking, what do you think that the future of computer science will look like?
If the past 30 years have taught me anything, it's that predictions are going to stymie anyone. So you all have grown up in sort of an explosive new age, and I don't know, I have my daughter think about this sometimes. Like, can you imagine life without a cell phone? Right? Like, if you think about the way we're training people, the way we're interacting with people, like, that has completely changed from 40 years ago. And that is completely different from 100 years ago. I'm always mystified when I hear these interviews about what life was. I can't imagine what life was like before a computer because I've never witnessed that. I can't imagine it before a phone. And so I think the technologies surprise us, what becomes possible. I would have told you, so deep learning is a big new catchphrase, right? New, and it's just a new form of machine learning, but it's one that is inexplicably and surprisingly powerful. And nobody called it, right? 10 years ago, if you read the papers, they'll say this problem is impossible. And people are throwing deep learning at it now. And so the one thing I have learned is to expect the unexpected because the technology is moving so quickly.
We do have another question. What is it like being a female faculty member in a male-dominated field?
So this has changed for me over the years. As a student, initially I struggled, and by the end it was much less of an issue. As a female faculty member, it's actually fantastic because I have great job security. I'm lucky in that my department is incredibly supportive. I work with originally a great group of guys. I was the only woman on faculty for 10 years. Now there's 2 more women. There's 3 of us. I love them. We have lunch. So I have been lucky in that it gives me a platform and it gives me job security and it gives me a supportive environment in which to advocate how I choose to. So I've been doing recently more like recruitment and retention research of how do we get people into computer science because we have a problem. You know, we're trying and it's not working. And so it's going to require something more than just throwing a Band-Aid on it, right? We can't just say, oh yeah, we'll recruit at a female only high school and that's going to solve the problem because we've had 30 years of trying to solve the problem. And so I think I live in a sort of a golden era. People are listening and for all its downsides, Me Too has given us a platform and a credibility that did not exist 20 years ago. I think it's a great pivotal moment and I hope things will continue to improve.
And are there any computer science books that you recommend for further reading?
Oh, so many. That's a really hard question. It depends on what you're interested in, right? So if you're interested in big data and sort of questions around that, I really like Weapons of Math Destruction, MATH Destruction, is a really nice one on how big data and computers are intersecting our day-to-day landscape. There's a really nice one that I picked up this summer called Algorithms of Impression, which is about how something as simple as a Google search intersects with minority and marginalized populations and exacerbates inequalities. These are all sort of popular level ones. If you're looking for one that's more coding focused, I recommend to my undergrads, once they're job hunting, the book Cracking the Coding Interview. Not necessarily because it's going to give you a sense of computer science as a whole, but it gives you a sense of the computer science interview and how they interview people and what kinds of problems they're going to ask you and why they're looking for these analytical skills in their employees. So that'd be another one. I don't know, there's so many. I have a colleague who just wrote one. She's a Black woman in computer science. I can't remember the title. It just came out. It's sitting on my desk at school where I can't get to it right now. I'm really mad that I left it there. Anyway, I could share if people are interested. My email here, I can put it right here. Erin.chambers@slu.edu. I have a public webpage, so it's easy to get. Oh, sorry, that was sent. Ooh, and I missed a private question here. I'll read that one in a minute. This is my email address, and you can find me. But if you Google Erin Chambers, there's an actress. But if you Google Erin Chambers SLU, you'll get me. I'm only the 5th hit if you Google Erin Chambers. So I'm happy to, like, if you give me some idea of what books you're looking for. But I think Weapons of Math Instruction and Algorithms of Oppression have been the 2 popular books I've been the most excited about lately. Someone emailed or messaged, I think, and didn't do it to everybody, of how many years do you have to take of college if you want to work in STEM? I can give you the computer science answer, which is a minor is totally great. There's a whole lot of companies. So we have people who major in everything from anthropology to communications to law to bio who choose to do a minor in computer science. And so what that gets you is 2 good core programming classes and then 2 or 3 you choose classes. And the core combination of being able to do good computer science work and having a deeper understanding of a domain field, that's key in most industries. So I see more and more students who, if they don't double major, they just try to do a minor, because what they really want to do is go do communications or law, but everybody needs to know more about computers and data science. And so this is a really powerful combination. So I don't think you need to feel like you have to major in it and do AP programming and do AP calculus. Like, play with it. Take the first class, take the second class, see if you like it. If you don't, you still have a little bit of computer science skill. That's never a bad thing from an employer perspective.
I got another private question. Are there any STEM books, just in general, like STEM, that you recommend for further reading?
Oh, that's a really big question. There are probably 12, and my mind is going completely blank because I didn't prep for that. If you're looking, and again, it depends on what you're looking for. You will, if you go to college and major in an area of STEM you're excited about, you will get a pretty thorough grounding, right? Like that's kind of the benefit of college. You can read these books on your own, but in college you get sort of this approved course of study with the set of courses we think fit together and give you a good introduction to the subject. So I would encourage you to do fun things, right? If you're excited about Lego programming, get that book. If you're excited about biology, go buy a biography of Jane Goodall, or, you know, it's sort of, you're at a point in time where your education is being handed to you by people who are hopefully pretty expert in designing a good education. So I like to tell students to do what they're passionate about. When I talk to people in industry who do interviews, they always say they don't really care your specific skill, right? If you don't have the exact language, you can learn another language. If you don't have exactly the right class in bio, they'll hand you a book. What they care about is your passion and your drive. And so being excited about something is kind of the best route to go. If you're looking for coping strategies in STEM, those get a little depressing. I read a particular one on motherhood in academia and almost dropped out of grad school the next day. So I would actually take those with a grain of salt. Get the resources when you need them, but don't, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy if you walk in too focused on the problems, right? It is a pretty good landscape. The pay gap in STEM is much lower than it is in general industry. People are really trying. And so I have found it helpful to focus on what I'm excited about, and people usually respond really well to that. That's not a great answer. So if you have more specific questions, email me and I can try to find some more targeted books.
And we have another question. What made you want to become a professor instead of working in the industry?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of things. So initially I didn't. I had my industry plan in line. I had my first job acceptance in hand, and what gave me pause was I knew even then I liked this interplay of math and computer science, and this particular sub area, I don't want to say it's more challenging. They're all challenging. That's not what I mean. It requires more formal study, right? Mathematics coursework, if you're a math PhD, you often don't get to do research until your 3rd or 4th year. And that's because there's been 1,000 years of mathematical history, right? You've got to do a lot of study to get to the unknown, right? Computer science is only 40 years old. You can read for a year and get to an open question pretty quickly. But in pure mathematics, you know, probably Gauss thought of it 400 years ago. And if he didn't, Euler did. And if he didn't, right? So there's been a line of study that's deeper. And so when I became, in particular in undergrad, not at all what I went into, I was really excited about cryptography and encryption and crypto systems and this interplay of math and computer science and in the crypto world. I knew that I had just barely started to scratch the surface. right? There's so much deep mathematics. You have to go take abstract algebra, you have to take analysis, you have to take probability to really understand these open questions. And so it was half that. I was excited, and I knew I took a year off and I worked in industry as an undergrad. I did a co-op and an internship, which I highly recommend. It was a fantastic experience. But I was surprised at 20 how hard it was to come back and go to class, right? You might see this after summer vacation. You go back and you're like, oh God, they want me to learn again. You know, it's that mindset and schedule that is very different. And so when I had the job offer in hand, I thought, well, if I do this, I'm going to go make money. I was engaged, so probably think about starting my family. You know, it was something I knew I wanted to do at the time. And it'll be really hard to give that up and come back and all of a sudden take classes again, right? To be out of that mindset and in that financial place of security, and then to give it up to come back to a grad school salary. So I said, let's do this first. And then I'll go to industry, because encryption, I thought I was going to wind up at the NSA or the CIA or, you know, RSA or something like that. And 2 years in, I taught a class for the first time. I TA'd and taught and absolutely fell in love with it. It was amazing. And made these academic connections, these friends at other universities and in other countries, and decided that I would really miss that interplay, that this cutting edge research and the thing I am now an expert in and the teaching and the mentoring and the getting to work with students. You get some of that in industry. So I've never been against industry, but again, along the way, it was, all right, let's try this next and see how I do. You know, if I don't get a professor job, I can always go to industry, or if grad school doesn't work out, I'll take the job then. They already offered it to me. They'll probably offer it to me again. Computer science isn't going anywhere. So I knew I could always go that way, but coming back to academia is a harder transition. And so I've maybe gotten stuck a little bit, but very happily stuck. Because it's what I'm really excited about still. I have a lot of friends who've left academia. They get tenure, or they get to a point in the tenure clock where they don't like the grant publication rat race. They find at a certain point, teaching can be stressful. If you're teaching a 200-person class and everybody has a problem and emails you, that's a lot of problems coming at you over email. It can be very emotionally and mentally taxing. And so I have plenty of colleagues who've made the opposite decision and partway through said, no, I'm gonna go to industry and solve fun problems. And, you know, that's always an option.
So it doesn't seem like we have any more questions. We're gonna wait a couple more minutes maybe, or see if there's any last questions that we want to ask.
Hopefully I'm not dodging them all. No like specific programming language questions or anything, so.
Oh yeah, what language do you think is the most useful in your field right now?
That's a hard question too. At the stage you all are at, I would, again, start with whatever you can get access to.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Python is probably a good bet. It's a really multi-purpose. It's most commonly, at least for the students we teach, the very first language we give them, because it's more accessible than some of the older languages or more lower level languages. I don't know if I would say that's the most useful, but by, at least in a CS major or minor, by the time you learn your third language, you start to realize the commonalities, right? Like there's some very important differences. If you do a major in CS, we have a whole course on programming language and how do you choose the right one and what hidden features or costs are there in each language. But at the bulk of CS jobs, they just want you to hit the ground running, and they're quite willing to hand you a book and give you a mentor and say, okay, here's a 2-week boot camp, go learn this language and come back to us when you're done. So I think Python's a really good one to dive into. If you haven't programmed at all, especially depending on how much math versus CS you like, R is a really useful one. It's a statistical language. So if you've ever used Excel and done averages or calculations there, R is sort of the next step up in how do you do things with numbers. Those are two really good intro languages, I think. I'm very partial to Python though, so I would go with that one. I admit I do like the Lego programming language. I think for getting the core concepts down, I'm amazed at how much they can squeeze into a graphical language these days. That's a fun area.
Mhm. Right, so it doesn't seem like we're getting any more questions so far, so I'm going to assume that we're kind of done with this session of Q&A. So I guess we can move on to our activity.
All right.
No, not thanks for coming. The activity.
Gotcha. Is it okay if I share?
Yeah.
Let me go up. Okay, so the activity I chose, oh, I can't.
I think Sonia has to stop sharing first.
Oh yeah, oops, my bad.
I'll have it up in a minute. So I chose an activity that's actually closer to cryptography, the thing that first got me excited about this math computer science interplay. So this is an exercise design. It's part of a book called CS Unplugged, which is a really fun one to like. Here's a good one to start with if you're curious. It's about teaching core computer science concepts without a computer, right? How do you teach a loop or an if statement, or how to sort, or how to do data structures? And so this one is about text compression. And the mindset you want to get in is you are storing data on a computer, or you're storing data to send it between people or write it to a CD or whatever, and space is at a premium. And it turns out English and biological genetic sequences and every other kind of data, they're highly repetitive, right? So you can look at this one. Let me annotate here and maybe pick a color. We can look here and see patterns. So if you stare at this, I'm going to put someone at the spot and hopefully someone will unmute. What's a pattern you see repeating everywhere? No wrong answer, because there's a lot of them.
Go ahead, Maria. If you want to type it in, that's fine.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I can't see.
The phrase pitter repeats 4 times.
Yep, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Hopefully I got the right ones. So it's not a bad thing, except that I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters. So I've got 6 times 4, 24 characters used to encode something that in a sense should only take 6 of them, right? 6 letters long. Now, so the thing to think about is, instead of doing it this way, and let me erase a little bit here, instead of wasting all this space, let me store somewhere over here in a table, pitter equals star. Right, so I'm going to have to write this down on the computer. I'm going to have to write those 6 things in a table and say that's the same as star. Okay, now what does that let me do? All of these now, if I write them down, just become a star. That make sense? Okay, so if you see pitter, what's the next obvious one? Everybody should look right next and see this one, right? Okay, same trick. Patter 4 times. Oh, I forgot with the red. How much did I save? Well, I had 6 letters 4 times. I had 24 characters. And instead of 24, now I have the 4 stars, plus I have to write this down once, right? So I have to write down 6, 7. I need a key to tell me, okay, what does star mean? It means these 6 characters, but then I can reduce all the 6 down to 1. So everybody hopefully will agree that 11 is less than 24. I've saved data. If I'm storing this on a CD or on a hard drive or sending it over the internet, instead of sending 24 characters, I'm going to send 11 characters, even though I have to write it down, right? So if I do the same thing for patter, well, patter, let's say, is a plus. So this becomes plus, and it's the same length, and it's the same number of occurrences. So I again take these 24 characters and I replace them with 11. I still need to write it in my legend up here. And then I need to write the 4 pluses. So that's going to be the same 11 characters. You with me? Okay, so this is data compression in a nutshell. And I don't know how much statistics you guys have, but this is pretty simple. If I had 24 and I now have 11, 11 divided by 24 is just under 0.5, right? So I've achieved what we call a 50% compression. I've compressed my data. I've taken it from being big and I've made it little, right? Now we can do this in other ways too. And this one is where it gets a little trickier. Do you see anything else that repeats?
Again, if you don't feel comfortable saying it out loud.
You can type, yeah.
Maria said the.
Absolutely, that's the next one. So if I do this, and here's where you get an idea of the trade-offs. So if I do I have to write down the and pick a symbol. Let's do a smiley face. Pretend that's one symbol. I know it's not, but we're just going to roll with it. So this becomes smiley face. This becomes smiley face. So I used to have 6, right? 2 times 3. I wrote the twice. Now I have 2 smiley faces, 1, 2, plus I have to write down THE and the smiley face. So here you get to the negative. 2 plus 4 is 6. So in fact, this is an unsuccessful compression. It's not worth it. Now, in a real piece of data, in a book, the is repeated an insane number of times. Oh, I guess, wait, I lied. And I really did something weird there. Can you guys see that? Sorry. Actually, I lied because I want to erase this. There is one other one. I missed the title. So, okay, now we have savings. If I make this a smiley face, now I had 3 times 3, and it's 9, and I can replace that with 3 plus 4, 7. So there's a trade-off here. The goal of text compression is you want to find the most common phrases, the ones that are used everywhere. So have you ever thought about frequency analysis? Anybody watch The Wheel of Fortune? Really old, I know, I'm showing my age, but I'm sorry, Alex Trebek, and it's not Trebek, Vanna White and Pat something. Anyway, they're phenomenal in terms of learning about text frequency. What are the first 4 letters anyone should check on Wheel of Fortune? Anybody watch it? No? No Wheel of Fortune lovers? Come on, you have to have parents and grandparents who are old like I am.
I have no idea.
Oh, there we go. Yep. S-T-E-R. Right? Those are the most common. Think about it, how much S or E appears. So from just those single letter frequencies, the reason those are the first 4 letters you should guess is they're the most frequently used letters in the English alphabet. So this kind of frequency analysis changes from data set to data set. In fact, there's a whole subfield of text compression that is only for genetics. Because genetics is really weird if you think about it. They only get 4 letters, right? Every DNA sequence is, or RNA, I'm not a biologist, sorry, I'm gonna screw this part up. You essentially have 4 letters repeating in different patterns if you look at the genetics of it all. So for every alphabet, you get a different set of text frequency. For every document, you get a different set of text frequency. So R, S, T, and E are the most common letters. T certainly shows up quite a bit in this, but is there even a single S? There's one. This is a very unusual document when you look at text analysis. But anyway, so I digress. Like I said, I like this topic. So the goal in text frequency, and there's a whole course called information theory that really hovers around text compression. And this is also a way into encryption, because they used to do things to compress data that made them harder to understand. Right? If you're sending messages, if you're sending telegrams, if you're communicating in the 1940s with a war office, you want that to be short and you want that to be hard to break, hard to read. And so text compression ties very closely with encryption and with trying to find unbreakable codes and send data securely. So, okay, so I lied a bit because I said 50% compression, but that's really only on a certain part of it, right? As we found, there are certain parts we can't compress. And sometimes, if you look at the word window, there's not really much we can do with that word. It doesn't repeat anywhere else. So the best we can do is to just spell that word. And so you might ask, is this the only way to do this? And the answer is going to be no. So let me suggest an alternative, and I'll see if you can follow where I'm going. Let me clear if everybody's good for now. If I'm looking at this one and I don't want to do whole letters, suppose I let you break up anything you want in the middle, right? So what is another common sub thing here? Well, TTER. If you're doing frequency analysis, pitter appears 4 times, patter appears 4 times. However, TTTR or TTER is twice as common. It is more frequent. You with me? So remember, this is for a computer, and it's going to get translated before a human ever sees it. So I don't care how incomprehensible it looks. I can instead make star equal to TTER, make each of these a star. And let's see how good my math is. How many of these do we have? Did I say 8? Right? 32? Yeah? Okay, good. You wouldn't believe how embarrassing it is to have a master's in mathematics and mess up calculations in public, so bear with me. Okay, so I used to take 32. Now I have, well, I've got to write it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. This goes down to 13. Okay, now if we look at this compression ratio, kind of counterintuitively, I've made it shorter, but it turns out it's going to be better because 13 divided by 32, that is better, right? That is, I'm not even going to try. That's roughly 6 over 16. Anyway, that's less than the last set of text compression. I've done better by compressing smaller fragments. So there's not one way to compress data. There's a lot of ways to compress data. That's why, like I said, I had to go back to grad school because there was so much to learn in this subfield. So this is just to sort of give you an idea. But I found a nice recap to show you how much this can be taken, right? To show you, so I'm kind of cheating. I'm showing you the result before the problem. Here's actually as good as we can do, right? So the best we can do is a 40% total compression. The original is 93 characters. And I cheated a little bit because I was ignoring the spaces. But the spaces is a character, right? It needs to be transmitted the same as anything else. So if instead, here's the code they come up with. They made this little sun to be a space, THE space. So for one character, you get 5. And if you notice, here's the, and here's the in the compressed representation. Here, they did what I did, TTER, but they were smarter and they remembered the space. So if TTER is an umbrella, is where it gets tricky, because they then can layer encryption on top of encryption. Notice this little umbrella doesn't appear anywhere in the compressed text, but it does appear over here. The umbrella is at the end of pitter and patter. So they're using codes within codes to encrypt the data, to compress the data. So you can walk through it if you want. They're able to go from 93 characters down to 56 characters. Keep in mind, I'm counting this as 25 and this is 31. Now, there's a trade-off in all computer science. Like computer science is literally just space versus time trade-offs. This is saved on space, but it's going to take longer to read, right? You can't, I can't just look on this and see the original pitter-patter poem. You have to sit down and translate it, right? So what we're doing is we're trading space compression so that our computer will take a little more time to translate the data in and out. So you can take a whole course on this in computer science or in electrical engineering, because it turns out data compression is really important for electrical engineers too, because they're really transmitting signals to each other. And this particular set of encryption, this is called frequency analysis, right? To take this and try to determine what the most frequent subpatterns are. But notice I'm not telling you how long it is. This is really hard if I hand you an entire book, right? If I hand you a 1,000-page book and I say, tell me what the best compression algorithm is, that's not obvious. I can do something. I can encrypt the, right? That's almost certainly going to be worth it. The THE with a space on other side. But otherwise, it's very dependent on the particular data you're looking at, because certain frequency analysis things like S doesn't appear hardly at all in this particular poem, whereas in a larger document, you would expect it to occur more frequently. So anyway, this particular activity, I know I'm running low on time and I didn't want too many awkward silences, has a few other exercises you can walk through on how to encode or decode data and how good can you get your encryption. So I can, if I stop sharing, I can probably put this in the chat, can't I? In case anyone's curious about it. This is, like I said, you get to something called coding theory pretty quickly. Oh, I keep sending randomly privately. I apologize. My chat is not cooperating. So here's the documents I did today in case people are curious and want to play more with it. It's a really fun area. Convinced me to go to grad school, so I liked it.
All right, are there any questions about that activity? That was really fun to listen to.
We have a question, not about that activity, but is it okay if we ask? Okay, one last question. So I got a private question. What universities do you recommend if you would want to work in STEM?
Oh, that's a good question. So some of this depends on area, and I'm sure all of you will have parents that weigh in on this because that's what parents do. We like to weigh in on things. So you can look up things like US News and World Report, and you can figure out which, if you're looking for a specific opportunity. I know I love biology and I want to be a doctor. I know I love computer science and I dream of Google, so I want to go work there. I want to go work at Apple, right? So that's where it becomes worth looking at those rankings, because the one place a ranking is good is for name recognition, right? University of Illinois, I'm very proud of my alma mater, was ranked 5th when I went to it, and that has opened doors for me. They know I went to a good school. But I think people get too sold by this and forget about the fact that the goal is to succeed in college. And most STEM fields, you're pretty lucky in that you have a lot of job potential and opportunities. So just like with the projects, I don't think there's a right answer, because I think it depends on what you're excited about. I know as much as I loved U of I, and it worked out really well, if I had now that I'm a professor and I see what the choice is, I would have told younger me to go to a smaller school. I think that 200-person, 95% male class was the worst thing I could have had at 18. I was not confident enough to walk into a room full of men and know that I was going to succeed, clearly. It worked out. I fought through it. I grew, probably. It was good for character development. But as a parent, what I would want for my kids is a place that's going to help them succeed. And so I think if you like the challenging curriculum and the big set of opportunities, like if you're not intimidated by a 200-person class and you're pretty confident in your computer skills, that's a great place to go. U of I or MIT but I know undergrads at MIT who suffered serious mental health problems because it was such a pressure cooker. Everybody there is passionate and driven and intelligent and excited. And that can be fantastic. That can be really hard. You know yourself best. Like I would really sit with yourself in high school and decide, yes, I like the bigger class. No, I don't. I think I want a 20-person class and I want my professors to know who I am. I will tell you clearly, I think I've succeeded. I got a PhD and an academic job and they all know who I am now, but there was not a single faculty member at University of Illinois who knew who I was until my senior year. Because as one of 200, you're not getting any individual attention. It's the way the program is. And it's not bad, but it can be a bit sad if what you're looking for is a mentor and some guidance and some help, right? So the advantage of a small school is that you'll get smaller classes, you'll get a more guided experience. We all follow the same curricula, so some of it is you're more choosing your peer group and your instructional style. And I would really encourage you, don't just look at the list. It's always good to apply to one of the top schools. It never hurts to throw an application and see if you get in. And if you do, you have that choice. But I would also encourage you to go visit and apply to at least one smaller liberal arts school, or one private school, or one school that's like, you know, we're not good in everything, but good God, we're really excellent in this one sub area that you're excited about. Take a few risks. I am not one to say you should go because of a friend or a significant other, but it can be nice to know some people at your campus, even if they're not your best friend. Even at U of I went and knew 2 or 3 people from my high school who were a year older than me. And that was key that first year, because it's hard. You know, you're ready. Good Lord, you want your parents to go away. But the first time they drive away and you know nobody in this entire town of 100,000 or bigger, if you go to a city school, you're on your own and you've got to figure out how to make that work. It's nice to have a safety net. So family nearby, if that's important to you, that's a good thing. A friend group nearby, the ability to get home, the ability not to get home if you're really excited about distance from your family, totally valid. Lots of people feel that way. That's maybe a holistic answer, but I caution people, pay attention to the rankings, know the pros and cons, but don't be sold by we're number 1, because people who go to number 10 or number 20 in computer science at least have pretty fantastic careers. I mean, Steve Jobs was a dropout. Who knew? Right? It's a little more complicated than you think it is when you're just looking at those rankings, and you want to succeed. So visit and trust your feeling, trust your, I fit here, I like these people, versus good God, I don't want to go to these parties and know these people and deal with this class.
So it's better to be like a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond, and kind of like melt.
I don't think that. I think for some people, it's better to be a big fish in a small pond. I think for others, they get that challenge and they thrive in the big pond, right? The small pond is more limiting, right? If you know you're excited about a certain set of opportunities, a bigger school will give you that. And that is not, like I said, I don't regret my choice at all, despite the challenges at the time. But I wouldn't be sold just on one or the other. I think this is a really individual choice, because if you're not going to succeed in one or the, like if you're going to feel stifled and not have people with common interests, you want a bigger school. But if you're overwhelmed, you maybe want to look at some in between. And there's a whole range. I mean, there's 2,000 person schools. There's my university is at about 10 to 12, so it's kind of medium. U of I had 40. It was huge. And there's a very different campus culture. I teach at a Jesuit school. I didn't go to any private school, so this was new to me when I became a faculty member. And my students choose it because they like having service learning and philosophy and theology. They like that kind of critical engagement with the humanities in a way that nobody exposed me to at University of Illinois. But research opportunities and clubs abounded at U of I, and you don't have the 40,000 kids in my school to give you that. So it's like all things, it's a trade-off. It's what you're excited about and where you feel like you'll fit in.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, especially since I know some of you are thinking about college and applying soon. So it's a really good thing to cover. So
yeah, I mean, this trade-off happens even with jobs. Small company, big company, independent, not. There's no bad answer. There's different adventures, I think.
So I guess we're at the end of the meeting because it is 3 o'clock. So thank you guys so much for coming to our Velocity meeting. I hope I see you maybe August 30th or our next meeting with Dr. Casey Looney, I think, or Miss Casey Looney on the 16th of September. So you guys can leave one by one if you want. And thanks for coming.
Just a reminder, follow our social media. Everything's at Velocity STEM. And we hope to see you again. Remember the STAR program. Bye.
Yep.